sound like a child.
In the shot.
I forgot we got the video now.
Oh boy.
Boom.
Yes.
There it is.
It's freaking awesome. I was just telling Tim, somebody at work, so at work, I sit in a cubicle next to somebody else, and before I got to where I sit, it was like right around March Madness when I started there last year, and these dudes mounted, like brought in wood and like a drill and a hammer and stuff, and they built this platform to mount a flat screen TV in between both of these cubicles. So we've got like Nintendo Switch, like cable TV, just going on the whole time. And today somebody put on an episode of the podcast, and I was like, what the hell are you doing? Why would you do that? But it was really cool to see the visual portion of it, because you don't realize like how much I talk with my hands, or like how sometimes Jared will say something and I'll just like give him a weird look, but you don't realize that you're doing it until you see it on video.
Or I'll just be like this.
Yeah.
And then be like, oh shit, there's video now.
Yeah. It's kind of a learning curve, but I think eventually we'll get used to it. So I was in here not too long ago. It's probably a week and a half ago, 2 weeks, and somebody was blaring some Karangbin. Who's the Karangbin fan around here? Do you guys even know what I'm talking about?
I know who you're talking about. I'm a fan, but I don't play them often, so I don't think it was me.
Yeah, it wasn't me. I was just playing like Bob Seger or something.
Is there somebody that's in charge of the music
We all
at your locations, or no?
We just all decide whenever we're on shift.
Yeah,
And
I think it
everybody
was
has pretty
Nick.
decent taste,
He just
so.
discovered them recently.
It's literally the reason I continued to come back after the first time I went to Kochek.
Nice.
You guys were playing Kevin Morby. And I was like, damn,
Yeah.
I could
we
get down
played-
with this place.
That's me and Ross. Yeah, we played the hell out of that.
Neal
record.
turned me on to
And
that.
then Mind Design came on, and I was like, oh my God. Like,
You know Mind
You
Design?
guys are 2 for 2.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to keep coming back. Because I would ask, I'd be like, all right, who the hell is this? And that's where I found out about Mind Design. And then I think I went and told Dilly about it. And then they started playing it. So
Who's Dilly?
Dilly Dials from Tinker.
Oh, I know who he is, but people listening don't know who he is.
Oh, well, they won't find out unless they know who he is.
Oh, cool.
At Dilly Dials.
We're going that route.
Yeah, absolutely.
See, you come here for the music. I come here for the people.
Well, I think initially I came back because of the music. Like, and here's the thing, like, everybody and this was a little over a year ago. This is probably when Jared and I first started Drink Culture. We were having a ton of meetings, and we decided to have those meetings at Kochek. And I don't know what was going on, and we'll get into when you guys started, but it was like we just started going there. And I was like, man, this place is pretty dope. And then the music started playing. I was like, okay, like I can really get down with this. And then I had the drinks, and it was just a whole experience. So the music is what made me feel at home. Is that an answer?
I actually didn't even ask a question. And that typically happens with you. You just
Nice.
answer.
That's
No,
what
that's
you
great.
said.
No,
You said, do you come
that's what
here
you
for the
want.
music?
Oh.
I come here for the people.
We get
Okay.
compliments on the music there all the time, and we don't have any specific strategy for it. So,
Did you guys use Pandora?
we use Spotify.
Spotify?
Hopefully, the BMI people aren't listening.
I know. That's what. Honestly, that's the reason why we
Or,
got by Naptown Fitness. We got hit up with that recently.
Did you?
So yeah.
Oh, my.
Yep. Yeah.
Funny
Noted.
story. So there must be snitches out there who like go
There
to
are.
these locations.
Oh yeah. In fact, hopefully we're not playing this part. We'll start from here on because someone might hear this and hit us up again. But no, yeah.
But there's a company in town whose whole job is to sell people on music subscriptions,
Okay.
so that you don't get in trouble with like ASCAP and BMI or whoever runs that stuff. It's kind of crazy.
There's a local company.
Mhm.
Who?
Amy's company that she works for.
We can talk about it later.
Yeah, not important.
I'd be interested to hear that.
Yeah, because we did get hit up and we are paying a yearly fee now.
Dang.
I know.
So where are we at, Jared?
Well, technically, where are we at, or like who?
Yeah,
are we at?
where are we at? Where are we recording?
Right now, we are in the Tinker House. Is that correct?
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
And what is the Tinker House?
So the Tinker House is this development here. It houses Provider on the first floor, which is our cafe, and the Hotel Tango production distillery, and then this beautiful event space that we're in right now called Tinker House Events. And on the third floor, it's an office space, and it's a Black Ink IT is the name of the company up there.
So whose sexy voice is that just dropped that?
Yeah, this is Neal Warner from Provider and Kochek.
Very cool. And who else is with us?
This is Ross Bemis from Provider and Kochek.
Excellent.
I think it sounds like we hit that button to make your voice sound a little bit more sultry. That was good.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. You need to be reading our ad reads. That's good.
Let's make a deal. Yeah, I'm into it.
Yeah, so this has been an episode, long in the making, I guess you'd say. We've actually recorded what, 1, 2? How many episodes? At least
one episode. At least, if I can talk, one episode with Ryan and Mrs. Hunley.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we've been wanting to get you on for a while to talk a little bit about, the business side of things, and got a lot of good questions here because Provider is probably the hot spot right now of Indianapolis.
I mean, it's good to hear. I'm not sure that it's true, but
it's true. Great. It's definitely true. So we'll dive into some of that here in a little bit.
Cool.
But we're excited, and thank you guys for coming on.
Yeah, we're going to have some coffee talk. I guess we'll just get right into it. Before we get into like how you got started, there's like a ton of coffee shops that are opening up left and right. Is that like the new hot thing?
I think so. When I moved back here in 2015, I was surprised that there weren't more already. I think that there are a lot of cities around here like Louisville, Cincinnati, that already have like a little higher saturation of independent kind of specialty coffee shops. And I guess 2015, I was just surprised that more neighborhoods didn't have kind of specific shops that I could go to whenever I was in whatever neighborhood. I remember feeling like I had to seek out coffee that I wanted.
Because who was around back then? I probably Calvin Fletcher's.
Calvin Fletcher's was around. B, and then Josie over at Rabble had just opened up, and then who else? Got Quills over there. That's where I met you.
Yeah. Quills opened up.
Yeah.
Were you working there?
Yeah, I was working.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Neal just walked in one day and gave me a very expensive piece of equipment.
Yeah, you were trustworthy. I could tell. I'd been working. I know we're getting into kind of where I got into coffee, but yeah, I gave him a refractometer to test his batch brewers. So that was within the first 30 minutes of meeting each other.
Yeah,
I guess it was a $700 device.
So what does that do?
It measures the refractive index of the coffee that you've brewed, so it'll tell you how much of the coffee you've pulled out into the water. So that allows you to basically it can measure the concentration of coffee the way that you might measure ABV and like
gotcha. That's where I've heard of it before. Was using it for brewing. So
yeah,
that's pretty dope. So that was 2015, and you had just moved here. Is that what you said?
That's right.
Okay, where from?
That was from the Atlanta area. I'd moved around a little bit. I've been in Chicago. I was in Madison, Wisconsin, and then I grew up in Indiana, but went to Bloomington for school. Done a lot of different stuff.
What took you to Bloomington?
I grew up in a farm town east of here, close to Richmond, called Hagerstown, Indiana, and then went to Bloomington for school. Went to the Jacobs School of Music and did a recording arts degree, and did work like that for about 10 years. I was working in like university libraries and doing like mastering records on the side. And that's what took me to Athens. Actually, I had a good contact at a studio there, Athens, Georgia. Ended up working there, mastering records and stuff for a while, and got into coffee there.
Can I ask a question that I probably should know the answer to?
No.
What's mastering records?
Oh, sure. So you record a record. You might, let's say there's a typical band. You record all of the bass, drums, guitars separately, and then you mix them down to stereo, right? And after you've gotten a mix for like a whole record, maybe 8 or 9 songs, 12 songs, you put them together in its own sort of audio session, and you master them, so you level match them so they play all together. A lot of stuff like equalizing the songs so that they flow together, and then finally kind of sending the final audio files off to like a record label or whoever's going to put it out.
You probably hate our microphones and headphones. You're like, oh my God, this is garbage.
No, this is totally great for what we're doing. Yeah.
Sidestep. Yep. Yeah. Sidestep. So what's the music scene like in Athens? I think I just saw a band play the Hi-Fi not too long ago. They opened up for Liz Cooper, and I think that they were from Athens.
Cool. Yeah. So it's really developed. Its heyday was in the 80s. REM and the B-52s are from there. And then more recently, in the late 90s, you had the Orange Twin label, I think is the name of it. And I can't remember the name of that label. And that would be Neutral Milk Hotel, Apples in Stereo, stuff from like the late 90s, early 2000s. And then more recently, you have all of Kevin Barnes' projects of Montreal, Kishibashi, who's well known here because of his affiliation with Joyful Noise. And so, yeah, really vibrant, robust music scene. somewhat similar to Bloomington, but more kind of grassroots. Like there's more bands, whereas Bloomington has some bands, but it's separate from like the record labels that are there that are pretty well known. Not necessarily a lot of Bloomington bands on those labels, but in Athens, it's like, there's this. It almost feels like the past or something. You go there and like people are still like all about bands and touring and stuff. And I don't know if that's the thing everywhere else. Like
I associate a lot of like jam bands and hippies with the Southeast, and you didn't bring up like a single one. So I was curious.
Totally. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned it. I actually, one of my jobs for the UGA library was transferring all of Widespread Panic's back catalog of shows that they recorded multi-track. They brought along these digital tape decks, 96 tracks, I think, and multi-tracked every single show that they ever played. And I transferred all those over the course of 2 years. That was my day job, and I was doing mastering at night and stuff.
And did you hate or love at that point?
Well, it was one of those things where I was working for the UGA library. And it was kind of a public-private partnership between the band and the university. And it ended up feeling like client work. So it's one of those things. I mean, you guys probably know what that's like, where you don't have as much of a feeling about the content when you're like working with these people every day, and it's like this is the work we're doing. So.
Gotcha. And then what did you go to Wisconsin after that?
I actually went to Wisconsin before that. I was I followed my wife up there. She got a good job, and I just kind of hung out in the woods, in the cabin, and cross country skied and stuff like that. And found myself
really
for a couple of years. Yeah, I worked on an organic vegetable farm. That was great. That was probably the best I've ever felt. That's what I did in Madison after Bloomington. Got involved in some Madison, Wisconsin sort of recording projects and stuff like that. And then, worked on an organic vegetable farm. It's really big up there.
Why do you say that was the best you ever felt?
I was just out in the sun all day. Yeah. And it was actually my first experience serving kind of the public. Here's your box of vegetables. It was a CSA farm. And so it was public facing. I was managing the farm. So I got to interact with all of the customers that we had. In markets, farmers markets in particular, it was my first kind of foray into like retail, sort of like small business stuff.
Yeah. How do you like Madison?
Oh, it's my favorite city. I don't even want to talk about it because I don't know.
You're going to all these places that have like vibrant scenes, it seems like, and just like almost not counterculture, but there's just things that aren't just like traditionally, okay, go to university, like I'm going to go get a job type of thing. Or like
totally
mastering records, working on an organic farm.
Yeah, I occasionally, not to overstate it, but I occasionally feel like that character in Slumdog Millionaire, if you remember that Danny Boyle movie, Slumdog Millionaire, where like, we have these just diversity of experiences, whether it's working on a farm where I was growing up or working on and that was like baling hay or detasseling corn or something. And then, getting to Madison and working on an organic vegetable farm, settling into like a, musical counterculture in different places. I just ended up feeling like I had this diversity of experience, which kind of ended up helping me quite a bit when I'm just like, chatting it up with somebody at the bar, and I can kind of relate to a lot of different people, relate to a lot of different sort of artisanal movements, if that makes any sense. And as it happens, in Madison was my first connection to specialty coffee, and this was all the way back in probably 2009, 2010. Kind of a lot of people you talk to in coffee will have that sort of eureka experience when they taste like a perfect or like a particularly well brewed, well sourced coffee. And at that time, specialty coffee was just starting to kind of blow up. You had Stumptown, Intelligentsia, some of the bigger names in coffee were making a splash on the coast and in Chicago, and then Madcap had just pretty much opened their doors in Grand Rapids. And I went to a shop in Madison that was serving Madcap coffee, and they had a pour-over V60 of a Honduran coffee, and I got it on my way to the farm one day. I was pretty crunchy. I always brought my mason jar in. You know what I mean?
Pretty crunchy.
So I brought in my mason jar, and they...
Did you say crunchy?
I said crunchy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought I said crunchy, too.
Country, though, as well.
I believe that's what I said. I mumbled.
Anyway, so they filled that up for me, and I didn't take any cream and sugar, and I don't remember why. I think the guy was like, you should try it without cream and sugar. And I was like, okay, cool, man. And so I walked out the door, and I was sipping on it on the way to work and at the farm, and I was like, what is this? It was like it was like that. It reminded me of like Willy Wonka, the gum that you put in your mouth and it tastes like every course of a meal. It was like
it's good. I like that analogy.
I mean, that's what I like about the best coffees that I've had is that they'll start on one sort of page and then they'll kind of as they finish they'll flip to several different flavors, and the aroma is a little different than the flavor itself, and then it finishes. It might start with fruits and florals and finish on some sort of like toasted sugar and toast, and it's just that was my eureka moment for coffee. It was like crazy. That was at what was that place called? It was Johnson Public House. That's it, Johnson Public House in Madison,
and that's
Wisconsin.
in Grand Rapids.
That's in Madison, Wisconsin. They were serving Madcap and Intelligentsia
yeah.
at the time. Yeah.
Ross, do you remember your first cup of coffee? You remember this experience? Was it that impactful?
Folgers?
Not my first cup of coffee. No, certainly not that impactful. I got a job at Starbucks long ago, before I ever really enjoyed coffee, and even while I worked there, I didn't really enjoy it. It was just, a drug at that point. But I think it was my time over at B Coffee. I had just gotten a job there. I was opening up the cafe downtown on Georgia Street, and I think I had some of the Mexico Eliden natural processed beans and pulled some single origin espresso shots out of that. And I never realized coffee could taste so fruit forward. It was just straight blueberries. It was pretty unreal. And I think that was the moment for me where I realized, even though I, at that point in time, had been in coffee for, 6 years, I think that was the moment where I was like, wow, coffee really is culinary. It really is something special. Something people don't realize.
And is that something that like actually changed? Like, has coffee always had those flavors and tasted that way, or was it until people started to take this artisanal movement towards it to where they somehow made it that way?
Yeah, I think the easiest answer to that question is that it is easier and easier. Even in the last 10 years that I've been into coffee, it's been easier and easier to find well-sourced, well-grown, well-roasted, and well-extracted coffee. Like I said, 8 or 10 years ago, the coffee quality itself, the processing wasn't as good. Yes, you could find these sort of like gems and stuff, but now it seems like every time you turn a corner, there's somebody like really dialing in the roasting process and the processing process. And you have a lot more baristas and coffee companies working directly with producers in the way that, in a way that sort of just raises the bar on quality across the chain, the supply chain. So I would cautiously say that, yes, it's gotten better. And with a particular focus on, there was that trend in the 90s of very heavily roasting the coffees or overdeveloping them. So you got these smoky and kind of burnt flavors. The trend back away from that to a more moderately developed coffee, a roast profile, that kind of came into fashion, especially in the States and in Europe. I mean, some places in Europe it had been that way for a long time, but Australia really led the push, and then it came along in the States roasting coffees in a less developed way, so that you got a lot of the actual character and the terroir of the seed itself, and not all these roasty, heavy, smoky flavors.
Does it take a special personality to want to be a roaster versus being like a barista or or developing coffee shops? I feel like there's a divide of who is a roaster versus who actually supplies or curates, I guess, the coffee.
Sure. Yeah, I would say...
Sorry, we got a weird thing going on with the word curate right now.
Oh, very nice.
It's absolute favorite word.
Yeah, it is.
Nice.
It's my...
So I would say typically yes. I mean, certainly. So I got into coffee through roasting. Actually, down in Athens, I was, like I said, I was working at that library. I was mastering records, and I started sample roasting and doing QC for a local roaster down there. And then I roasted professionally for 2 years at that roaster. And then I got in contact with the Tinker Boys, and through that Indiana connection, we were just talking about roasting and stuff like that. And they said, there's not a lot of cafes in Indianapolis. You should come back here and start some cafes or something. So in terms of the personality, like, I was like, is that something I could do? Like, I never even thought about opening a retail cafe. So I started thinking about that question a lot. I was working with a lot of cafes who were using our coffee, and I would go in there and talk to the baristas, ended up getting kind of barista trained myself. And I would say that certainly the trend on personality is for a roaster to be a little bit more like a brewer, somebody who's kind of monkish or austere in their habits and sort of focuses on details in a very granular way. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I would say that a good barista does something similar, is pretty meticulous about their habits, but has to add an additional level of being like a bartender, being fluent with the needs of people around them, being hospitable as like an instinct and not just like, something they're putting on. A good barista kind of exists in both those worlds, whereas a roaster, I think, can get away with being a jerk.
Yeah.
Well, because they're not customer facing, right? Like, for the most part, like, you think of
Totally.
Jeff, total sweetheart, but that dude's so in the background.
Oh yeah, he's
listening right now. He's like, "What are you saying?"
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what
it's
I'm
funny
saying, Jeff.
as you were going through that, like, love Jeff and all, but I was literally picturing him the entire time as you talked about like being super granular, being somewhat behind the scenes in that sense. And then as soon as you start talking about barista, like, I literally shot over to the most social person I know, in a sense of like just knows your name after seeing you for the first time.
Oh, totally.
And if Ross doesn't know your name, he's going to find out your name right then and there. So like, that's that personable, client facing demeanor you're speaking of, which is pretty awesome.
Totally. Go ahead. Ross.
I was going to say, I worked with a salesperson recently. Well, did like a private latte art session with him at Kochek, actually. And there was an event going on upstairs, and there's a lot of people coming in like, hey, where's the bathroom? Where's all this stuff? And we're closed at this point. It just looks like we're open, just doing some training. And this guy, he kept chiming in. He was like, oh, the bathrooms are over there. They're over there, and like before they even asked a question, he was just like pointing in that direction and, taking them where they need to be. But he's like an extremely successful salesperson who's just naturally good at reading people and their body language and all that stuff. And it was funny because, he was having a great time doing it. I don't know if he was like kind of buzzed or something, but he was just on one doing it, and he's like, "This is what I do all day. Is I just read people, And I was like, "That's a good point." I think there's, not just hospitality and greeting people with a smile and learning their names, but just the attention to body language as soon as they enter the door. Like what kind of experience are they looking for? Are they looking to just get their cup and get out, or are they actually wanting to sit down and try to truly experience this coffee or get to know me or, socialize.
If I can jump in, one of my favorite things that Ross does in particular, and I do it okay to a certain degree, but he finds it so natural, is his hospitality is almost like mind reading sometimes. It's like in these small ways when, somebody walks in, he just knows it's their first time. And I don't know how he knows sometimes. It's like he can just tell, and he takes an extra second to walk through the menu or something. Or, somebody looks up in just that one particular way, and he knows exactly what they're looking for, whether it's the bathroom or the water or the lids or the sugar or something. I'll see it happen. This person will just kind of like have one little look on their face, and Ross will be like, oh, the sugar's over there, And it's like...
Are you a mind reader?
Yes. The Wi-Fi password is nice weather.
And I could just...
That's most commonly asked, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can lead with that one and get pretty close every time. But that's one of the things that, like, and we've been buddies for a while now, but when I think one of the first experiences I had being served by Ross was over at Quill's. I think I brought Oliver in, and he would have been my son. He was like 3 at the time or something. Yeah. And made him like a hot chocolate or something, and made Oliver feel like he was the only person in the whole room for like
Cool. I
2
didn't know
minutes.
that.
Yeah. And
awesome.
I was like, I'm going to leave this guy my refractometer.
and now he's addicted to hot chocolate because of you. So when you're baristaing, right, like, and I always feel like this is probably one of the most difficult parts. Like, you fill that thing to the brim, dude, right? Like, there's no margin for error on these things, right? So you've got
hate that. I hate
right?
that I do that.
But at the same time, you've got the whole added element of like having to be hospitable and talking to people and handle all these other situations under very ostensibly stressful situations of like, okay, if I don't get this right, like that can ruin someone's experience, right? That Instagram picture will never happen if you ruin the artwork on their latte, and then they probably won't want to pay for it.
Well, I don't know about that. If they're that butthurt about it, I'll make it over for them. But
I would be.
Yeah.
Probably.
All right.
No.
Well, you're also the Instagrammer that takes a picture of every single cup of coffee you've ever had made for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Build good habits.
That's right. That's a good habit. That's great. I can't wait. I can't wait until we get into the nose of a coffee shop later on. So.
That's drink culture about how that's going.
Be.
It's going well.
So,
but yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
I mean, I asked a question.
You did.
Just jumping in. So, like, how do you handle all of that, right?
No, geez, I don't know. I mean, it's years of experience, just kind of multitasking and trying to read people in my peripheral. You know, like. Shit, I don't know, man.
I mean, am I playing it up to like? Are people pretty forgiving generally? I
think
this
so.
Like weird thing where people are just like impatient, and this is like a patience practice.
I mean,
of
it's
like
certainly
going to get good coffee, right?
It depends on. I mean, it depends on the guest, but I think being a barista is at least as challenging as being a very good bartender. And then because you think about all the different drinks you have to make as a bartender, and you're doing that same kind of thing as a barista, but you have to make sure that the coffee is still dialed in very well. And some of the processes you're doing, you know, shaking a cocktail is a very sort of like elemental movement. But when you're trying to have a conversation while precisely pouring a swan in a drink, there's just kind of this next level of repetition that it takes to be able to do that. And I think. I mean, we can both pour latte art and have conversations and take orders at the same time at this point, but it wasn't always like that. You know, I remember like getting my feet in the right stance before I was going to pour a swan or pour a tulip, and exactly. And then I gradually it's just like I compare it to playing guitar, where or playing in a band in general, where you have a whole lot of different stuff going on, but once you've played that set 18 times on tour, like. You can kind of do it when you're in your sleep. You know,
there's a lot of truth to that, but I think. Going back to your question, I think there's a lot to reading people, seeing what they're there for, how urgent their experience appears to be, as well as, I don't know, maybe there's some level of being readable yourself. I don't ever want to look like I'm in a real hurry as a barista. I want to seem cool, calm, collected, in control. But also, you know, it's still obvious when you're busy. It should be anyways. And so I think a lot of people, you know, when they're waiting in line and, you know, they see what you're going through, they can read you as well and just be like, this guy's got it under control. He's going to be with me as soon as possible. He doesn't need to say that. Yeah. It should just be noticed. And if they don't notice it, I don't know what to tell them. Honestly, it's just kind of like, all right. I'll be right with you, but
so there's a line of 7 people. The 6th person comes up and then asks for a menu at the register. How does that make you feel?
well, I mean, it's whatever. I just keep doing it, you know. Go through it, and I'll walk them through it as I'm busting out that line of drinks. But I mean, it is kind of silly, though.
I mean, for real.
Yeah. But the problem, I mean, people lack common sense, right? And I'm sure you see that on a daily basis.
Oh, yeah.
And when you see that on a daily basis 20-plus times, I mean, are there days that you walk away and you're just like, I need to get the hell out of here?
I mean, I would say that there are certainly some days that are more like that than others. But in this line of work, You got something?
I mean,
I was just in this line of work. If you allow stuff like that to really get you down, you're not going to be in it for very long.
Yeah.
There's kind of classic examples, and a lot of it is on the guest side. Do people really stick gum on the bottoms of tables anymore? And the answer is yes. Like, yes, I scrape off gum from the bottoms of tables. Do people like try to bring McDonald's in here and sit down and try to eat it and think that's cool? And I'm like, yeah, they do.
Those are the kind of situations.
Do you allow that?
No.
Do you tell them?
Yeah, and I'll go up there and politely say, like, we can't have outside food and drink in here. I really like that you like the space, but you can't eat McDonald's in here.
Have you guys ever had like a blow up experience or anything that you can recall of someone just getting pissed off at like one of your decisions?
I've had a couple since. So we recently started kind of limiting technology use on weekends here. So like, I
was one of my questions later. So
sure,
let's go there.
Yeah, you want to go right there. So that has mostly been received positively, and in fact, knock on wood, we've seen a bump in revenue since we've done that. I think tables are kind of turning over a little more easily. People are finding seats, especially larger groups of people, and we're not getting the kind of the guest that gets a cup of coffee and sits with the laptop for 6 hours during our busiest hours
at a 4-top table by themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I've been there.
Sure, and so I did in the lead up to that. I posted it on Instagram. I was like, "Hey, we're doing this." In retrospect, I wish I would have sort of posted signs in the space for like a week ahead of time, but we sort of just did it because I don't know. We'd been talking about doing something like this for months because it had become a real big issue since the patio, is no longer usable in the winter. And so, yeah, I had a couple people kind of blow up at me. And I get it. I was in the space. I just made sure that, especially that first weekend, that I was in the space and like the one myself telling them like, yeah, we're actually not doing laptops on Saturdays from this time to this time. I would say, like, if you could wrap up what you're working on, and then we'd love to have you, stay here, have a coffee with us, blah, blah, blah. But, and I heard words like, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Whoa.
I heard words like, this is discriminatory, like language like that.
It's anti-technologist,
bro. Words. I kid you not. On one of the this was more on a thread on Instagram. This comment was something like that people, like students, were being oppressed by my decision, by this rule. Oppressed. That's a word.
Oh my gosh.
That somebody used. So it was a little bit wild, I guess, to just the strong feelings that a lot of people had. I think especially students who are just spend so much time on their laptops kind of late at night studying and stuff like that. And I think also, I think I remember being, just out of high school, maybe in college or something, having a little bit of a flair for the dramatic, like this is a big deal. That somebody's oppressing me, and then kind of living a little bit longer and being like that's probably not a big deal that they don't allow laptops from 9 to 3 on Saturdays. Like, and
that's all it is, right? 9 to 3 on is Saturday and Sundays.
Yeah, 9 to 3 Saturday, and then like 10:30 to 12:30 on Sunday.
And so, like, if someone comes in or from out of town brings a laptop in and they open it, like, does a staff member go there and say, "Hey, sorry, we just don't allow that"?
Yeah, we try to get out in front of that by having signs posted. Okay. I'm not a big fan of posting signs and placards everywhere, but for this particular issue, there's a sign on the door when you walk in. There's a sign at the register when you're making your order. There's a sign on pretty much every table, and it's just a polite sign that says, "Welcome. We're laptop free from these hours, these hours." So it almost never comes to the point unless somebody is just kind of ignoring one of the signs that we have to kind of go out and be like,
Can you restrict Wi-Fi access from those times?
So we went through a lot of different sort of scenarios of how to manage technology in the space. And the thing that I didn't love about solutions like that, like maybe that could be part of the solution. We might do a voucher system or something. Or turn off the Wi-Fi during certain hours. But what you find is that, like, people tether their phones to their computer, and people, just find a way to kind of do it. And if you want the space to work a certain way, you just have to tell people, like, this is the way the space works. And I liked a more human solution than, like, what I felt like if I just doing that is more of like a passive aggressive solution or something. Like I don't know. I think if I did a voucher system for Wi-Fi and I kind of eliminated convenience outlets from the space and stuff like that, that would sort of send a message. But at the same time, like I really have no interest in losing those laptop guests on like a Sunday or on like a Sunday afternoon or Monday afternoon or something. Like I go in there and work myself on laptops. So if I can figure out how to sort of have it both ways, like that's what I want.
Yeah.
Will you ever get to the point, and I want to talk about these drinks because they look super good and I want to drink one, but I want to make a wise choice before picking.
Sure.
But do you ever think that you'll get to a point to where you'll eliminate things other than technology that disrupt a conversation, right? So like if the goal, and I don't know if this is your goal at all other than like getting more people in and not just sucking up a table for one person, but if like the bigger goal is to like create conversation, have people have these human one-on-one interactions and experiences, like will you prevent somebody from reading a book or like reading a newspaper and bringing that stuff in because that can have the very same effect? Right.
I would never get to that point. It is one of the sort of second. So the first goal is to allow our cafe, which is really a restaurant, is to allow our restaurant to function the way that it has to keep us in business. That's number one. Allowing, making that space for larger groups, making it so that people aren't tying up a foretop by themselves for hours and hours. When you get on that laptop, you just kind of get transported into a totally different world and you lose track of time. It's what happens. With other things like reading and newspapers and stuff, I have no interest in limiting those sorts of things, even though I do like the side effect of the space feeling more alive, the space feeling like when I walked in there the first Saturday that we did that, we were still packed full of people. We ran out of seats still. But it was a little bit moving because it was like, this is what I imagined when I designed the interior of this space. You know what I mean? Like, I saw all these people talking, laughing, having drinks. Some of them were eating some were eating biscuits or whatever. Some of them were having cocktails, and it was great.
When a decision like that's made, is that like purely your decision? Like who's the management team? Who's the one making the business high level decisions?
Sure. So it's mostly me and my brother. And then we brought on recently a general manager. Her name's Nicole, and we've been working with that a lot. But it's always pretty democratic. I mean, if anything, we move pretty slowly on a lot of stuff like that. Just we make sure we have everybody's kind of opinion on it. I would hate to just sort of like roll something like that out and just say this is the way it's going to work without asking people like, what's been your experience? What do you think would work? So yeah, the management team's pretty much me and Paul and Nicole. And then Ross and Courtney help us out on the coffee side in particular. And then we don't really have a lot of structure to our company.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And that's between here and Kochek.
That's
correct?
right. Yeah, we a lot of some people flow back and forth between here and Kochek, and then we have our bakery over there, of course. So it's a pretty small company, and generally, I guess to answer your question, I typically make the kind of final decision on most stuff.
Okay. And then for like full-time staff would be the 5 of those that you just named,
mm-hmm.
and then you have a bunch of part-time people.
Yeah, actually, most of our people are full-time. We employ.
I can't think of anybody here.
I don't want to do a total count, but I feel like we're close to 20 people between the 2 spots now in the bakery.
So it was 25-ish.
Is that right?
I think, yeah. Last time I counted, yeah.
And do you guys get together as like a group of 25 and have staff meetings? Like
I'm
always nerd out on the business side of things.
No,
I like to see how companies run.
Yeah, and so our company is like kind of it's pretty much been by the seat of our pants since we took off at Kochek, and we hit this level of momentum that like I feel like we're just now, and that was 2 years ago, and our projections were just pretty low for what we. What we thought we were going to do compared to what we ended up doing in revenue that first year at Kochek was like we have basically been behind the 8 ball in management since we took off at Kochek, and for that reason, we're just now catching up on some of these like kind of business related things. What was your original question? I kind of got off on a tangent.
I don't know. What was my original question?
It's
Do you
about-
guys
about
have
the-
like group
Staff
staff?
Group staff meetings. So
Yeah.
I guess the answer is
Nice.
we don't have a regular staff meeting right now. We have had them in the past.
Yeah.
It's something that we are like actively planning to do. When you have a business that's open like almost every waking hour, it can be challenging to, and we also, it can be challenging to kind of find the time to get literally every member of the company together and do something like that. But that's the plan, is to get more staff meetings. And
I know we got one coming up in a couple
we
of
do.
weeks. Yeah.
Mhm. And we have gotten more management structure as we've gone along.
Who runs the numbers? You?
So that's my brother, and we have a bookkeeper named Tori, and we do hire an accountant as well.
Very cool.
Smart. So what's on the table?
Oh yeah. So here we have now they're kind of they've sat for a second, but we have the cold smoked espresso. That's a
To what it tasted like.
Yeah, cool. So we smoke the glass with star anise smoke, and then we shake up a fresh espresso with some simple. Got a little vanilla in there and some orange bitters. Really, what you're getting on the nose is like that kind of campfire-y star anise smoke smell, and you'll get. This is a classic preparation of espresso from the coast of Italy, called a sciacquerato, which is just shaking up a fresh espresso with simple syrup, and it foams up because of the CO2 in there. In our case, we've added some orange bitters and the smoke element and stuff, and that's the cold smoked espresso. This is also a smoky drink. It's the penicillin. You a penicillin fan?
You're the one that told me about that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a Scotch cocktail. It's kind of a modern classic. Came out of New York a few years ago and kind of took over. But it's a Scotch sour with a little bit of honey and a little bit of our ginger turmeric reduction. That ginger kind of element that we were talking about earlier. That's kind of that reduction is kind of the core of about 3 or 4 drinks on our menus, and we take a huge amount of fresh rhizomes every week and process them down into that reduction. So turmeric, galangal, and ginger, a little bit of chili. So so it's a Scotch sour with some ginger and honey, basically, and it's got some smoky, peaty Scotch spritched over
I
top.
want to try that
It's
one.
literally my dream.
Yeah,
Like
we're gonna
everything-
try that one.
Yeah, please go for it. It's not gonna get any colder. Yet another smoky drink here. What do you think?
Oh man,
Is that
that's
the deal?
awesome. Yeah.
Cool. Another smoky drink here is the Mezcal Squirt. That is our house Paloma. So all of us are big fans of Mezcal here. Can't work here if you're not. Just kidding.
It's true.
So it's true.
This one is the Mezcal Squirt uses Mexican Squirt, which just
It's a
uses cane
drink,
sugar.
people. Squirt is a beverage.
Yeah, and Uwal Mezcal as well. And the thing that I like about our Paloma in particular, it's a classic thing to put some agave spirits with some grapefruit soda. But the thing I like about ours is that we actually use 2 bubbly elements. We dry it out a little bit with some cava or prosecco, which allows it to not be like that kind of sweet soda. It's more of a dry cocktail. This is a spritz, which we like to focus on fizzy drinks, so it's cool. That's the Mezcal Squirt. And then we have looks like the Nice Weather is over here. That's a stirred cocktail. It's kind of a variation of a white Negroni, and we use Aquavit for that. I think that's
What is Aquavit?
That's kind of like a Scandinavian spirit. It's a Scandinavian spirit that's similar to gin. So whereas gin is like juniper and the citrus and all that, Aquavit is caraway, dill, also some citrus. It just all depends on the recipe, but it's kind of like the Scandinavian answer to gin. And this one's made in Minnesota. As it turns out, the Twin Cities are kind of like Aquavit capital of the U.S. All the distilleries up there are making it. So this is from Tattersall. We have used a Norwegian Aquavit in this cocktail before, so that's going to be not quite as bitter and not quite as sweet as a typical Negroni or Boulevardier. It's going to be a little bit bitter from some Cochi Americano that we use in there. We use a dry vermouth from Lo-Fi, which is a domestic producer of vermouth in California. And that's going to have kind of a fennel note to it. So you got fennel, caraway. It's a fairly savory cocktail with not much sweetness. It's pretty fun.
You should start a podcast.
Why's that?
That was well done.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
the
appreciate it.
descriptions were
I think we took over this side of the drink, so we're not gonna. Yeah, man, we're not gonna beverage them all. That would be rude.
I mean,
cheers.
We can also share.
Yeah.
You know.
Cheers.
Ooh, I got the Pistaccio. Cool.
Dude, you don't know who's got what right now, man.
That's true.
We got some
It's
crazy.
that time of year.
We got
Ross,
some
you missed me, man.
unnice
Sorry
weather.
about
You're good.
So
So
you got the one that's going to amp you up there, and everybody else.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
cocktails. So let's talk about when Code Check started, like how that idea came about, and how you ended up here in Indy.
Sure, yeah. So I think I pretty much got the quick backstory all the way from Madison to then Chicago, and then it was the Atlanta area. I started roasting. And yeah, when I was roasting coffee down at Thousand Faces in Athens, Georgia, I had made it a habit of getting samples, getting coffees that were roasted all over the country, especially roasters that were doing coffees that we were also doing, so I could compare them and the profiles and stuff. And so I came across Tinker, and they had just opened up. This would have been 2013, 2014, and maybe 2015.
14. I just did an ad read for them, so
Great.
I remember it specifically.
So yeah, I think it was 2014. And I was like, oh, they're from my home state. I grew up less than an hour from them. This is cool. So I tried it, and I was really blown away by it. I thought it was terrific. It was a Kenyan coffee, and it wasn't one that I was roasting. I just thought it was cool. They're from Indianapolis. So through that, I got in touch with Steve, and if you've ever talked to Steve, it's like he's an easy guy to talk to. So
he knows his shit.
Yeah. So me and Steve kind of struck up, I guess, a little bit of web correspondence, a couple emails here and there. And he was like, he knew us from Indiana, and he was like, Indianapolis could use cafes. We just started up. There's a couple other things in the works, but like there's tons of room here. It's a bigger city than most people realize, and you should come here and do cafes. So he got through some way. I got connected with the folks who were opening this place called Open Society Public House that was at 49th and College. It's since closed, but we did it was a very ambitious project, and I was brought in to help with the cafe side of that. That was just kind of a ticket for me to get back, find a job, get back here. Me and my wife, we have kids, and we've been talking about moving back closer to the family. Everybody's up here, so used that as an excuse to come up here, helped open that cafe. And I had been doing a lot of QC work at cafes that were using our coffee down south. So I was very used to equipment install, very used to training, barista, hiring baristas, stuff like that. That was all just experience that I had through that roastery. So we started Open Society Public House. I stayed on for a couple months, and then started looking around for what my project was going to be, kind of first cafe. And again, a Tinker connection. The Athenaeum was looking to put a cafe in, and looking for somebody to do one. So they got in touch with Tinker, and they were like, "Nah, we're not. That's not something we're looking at doing right now." But we know this guy Neal, blah blah blah, so I got in touch with the Athenaeum Foundation, and that building is run and owned by this foundation, whose job it is to maintain the building and to try to make sure that it remains kind of like a vibrant community gathering place in the city. So part of their idea for that was this cafe. It took a lot of pitching. Cassie Stockamp, who's since left her post as president of the foundation, had a vision for what the first floor should look like. She went out on a limb on us because this was our first business, Coat Check, technically, even though I'd done other cafes. Like it was not a sure bet. So we all worked together for a few months and got that place open. And the thing that attracted me to it in particular was, one, she was really generous with the rent. And that's a big deal when you're on Mass Ave. Two, we had this really giant space that I knew that the laptop thing could be an issue, and I knew that I could sidestep that, running out of seats and stuff because of this sprawling space. And just the sort of, when you walk into that building, just the sort of like, it's almost like surreal or something, like all that weird old architecture and the wood carvings that were done by hand and stuff. And when people walk into the building looking for our cafe and they haven't been in there before, they're like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny because I'll hear, I don't know, more confident members of parties being like, oh, it's an old church. I'm like, no, this has never been a church. You know what I mean? And so the architecture and the community-oriented kind of nature of that space was just very attractive because, I don't know, you know, a lot of specialty cafes end up in sort of, I don't know, trendier glass front storefronts and stuff. And this is down the hall from a Y, you know, like YMCA. And so we just get all sorts of different people in there, and we kind of designed our service style and our menu to sort of fit, like, we wanted it to be a place where, you know, your card-carrying coffee aficionado feels at home. They, you know, they can talk to the barista about what coffees we have on at a particular time, what they taste like. But also just like your friend who's working out at the Y comes down and gets, you know, whatever drink they want to get, you know, and they feel right at home as well. So that was kind of the impetus for it. We started out in 2017 and sort of we thought it was just we were just gonna do like a kind of minimal amount of revenue a month. We're just gonna be like in our little corner of the sandbox. My brother learned to make croissants on YouTube. And,
You're kidding me.
No.
Those bomb-ass croissants.
Totally.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shout out to the person on YouTube that taught
exactly.
Paul how to make croissants.
Yeah. So then he baked literally every day for the first 4 months that we were open. He didn't take a day off. He was in there at 4 a.m.
That was crazy.
Yeah. And then it was me and Ross and Courtney, and then Paul's wife, Audreyalice, our friend John, and we started the cafe. And then race day weekend, I remember, was coming up. It was May. We'd have been open like 2 or 3 months. And the New York Times featured us in their 36 Hours in Indianapolis thing about coming to Indianapolis for the race. And I remember that was the weekend before the race, and I had scheduled myself on Sunday afternoon, like by myself, because I was like, yeah, I can hang with this, you know. But that had come out the day before, and I remember standing literally by myself at Coat Check and seeing 50 people like walk in the door in the course of 15 minutes, and then I was like, okay, well, I guess the gig's up. I don't know. Like I was, you know, it was like Ross said, you know, get this line of people. I was sort of going as fast as I could and kind of talking the line up as much as I could. I mean, I had a couple people walk out because they were like, "This is crazy," you know. But we made it. I don't know. I collapsed after that, but
yeah.
Why is it called Coat Check?
Yeah. So the that space. The space that we're in is like a little like 200 square foot kind of thing where the bakery is. That started out around the turn of the last century as a kind of bursar's office, a sort of money office for German immigrants, essentially. So it was basically like an immigrant bank. Existed at the Athenaeum because a lot of the German immigrants were like not so cool with putting their money in, you know, more established banks. So you'll see around that woodwork behind our bar, there's like still the remnants of like a lot of security bars and stuff like that. So it was that first. And then as the population of German immigrants who kind of used that as their home base, as they kind of assimilated, it was not necessary to do so much of that. And the theater really took off mid-century, and American Cabaret Theater was there, and so they made that space into the Coat Check around the 1950s, 60s, I think. And it was that for several years, for decades. So there's this airport lettering above that that window from like that era, mid-century, and it says Coat Check up there. I love the typeface, and so I left it. They were going to take it out because it's actually not historical. That lettering up there was there, but it was there from mid-century. So I was like, no, leave it. We'll call it Coat Check. So Coat Check Coffee.
That easy.
Yeah.
Did you ever have concerns with the space? Were you ever like, this isn't big enough? Like, obviously you had envisioned what you wanted, right, prior to opening. Like, were there concessions that you had to make to get a spot? Or were you like, we can make this work? Like, I love this.
Yeah, there were pretty major. So I wasn't going to do a space and almost walked away from the project because Cassie originally, and the foundation originally envisioned that space as being kind of a kiosk style thing behind that wood counter. If you can see that, like behind the bar at Coat Check, there's that wood kind of window back into the bakery. They were just going to have us set everything up in there and serve out of that window. And I was like,
so there wasn't going to be like a desk out in front.
Right, there wasn't going to be that bar out in
Got
front.
it.
So they were like, I'm really leery about.
Was it because it's like spatial issues? They didn't want it like in that
some of that.
hallway?
It was like it was egress and stuff like that. And it was also like there was some historical issues because it's a National Historic Landmark. So technically, our bar is built in like segments that are modular that we could theoretically move if we had to. Then we're not really going to move them, but we actually, our plumbing from the espresso machine and stuff drains into buckets underneath there because we have one floor drain that we could get in the entire space. So we empty these buckets from the espresso machine drain and stuff every 2 hours. Yeah, we had to do that because you can't. I mean, Kochek wouldn't be what it is without that big long bar, And I didn't want to do a sort of like, kiosk style thing where you can't interact with people. And in terms of like what that space has thrown at us, I mean, it's been everything. I think one of my sorry to hog the mic, I guess, but
you're good.
One of my an example of that last spring, I guess, so 2018 spring. I got a call in the middle of the night. So when you have a business that's open late, you have to do all your maintenance and stuff after that. So I got a call from my brother in the middle of the night, and he had been putting up shelves in the space and coat check. And it was after midnight. I don't know what time it was, but he was like, "Oh, dude." He just kept saying, "Dude, oh no." And I was like, "What's going on?" And he said, "Oh, I was putting up shelves," and he had apparently a water line had burst in the wall, like inside the wall. I think he hit it with like a drill bit when he was hanging this bracket, and it was a wide open water line that he thought pretty fast. And he ended up getting it. It could have been worse, I guess I should say, but it did flood the entire first floor as well as down into the ballroom of the Rathskeller.
And they didn't kick you out?
They didn't kick us out. We had insurance, thankfully. But I went in there in the middle of the night, and there was 6 inches of water, like from the back corner of our bakery all the way out to the hallway there, like where the bathrooms are. It was standing water, and Paul had grabbed a Sawzall. So it was crazy that the plumbing in that building, it was just, it's insane. So Paul had grabbed a Sawzall, and like my brother's very resourceful, and he had plowed into the plaster and stuff in this wall, and he's also kind of big and strong, and he ripped the plumbing out of the wall and shoved it manually into the floor drain to stop it from just flooding wide open all over the I mean, it was still bad. It was probably that there was a wide open water line in there for probably 25 minutes, which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
And then it was still overflowing the floor drain when I got there, but it was at least, somewhat contained. And then David, who is this really dear person, who is the maintenance person at the Athenaeum, it's one of those things where like David, he's probably in his 50s or something. When that guy retires, I don't know what they're going to do at the Athenaeum, because he's the only one who knows like the ins and outs, all the keys, all the little things about the HVAC system and whatever. But he got called out of bed. We had to set off the alarm to get him a call. This is to tell you a little something about the way this building is put together. He was at one point scaling a wall downstairs in the Rathskeller to get to the right place to where to shut off the water to the whole building at 3 a.m. or whatever it was. So it ended up miraculously we only had to close for about a day when that happened.
I was gonna say, I don't remember hearing about that.
I think when we interviewed Cassie, she had talked about like how expensive HVAC and plumbing was, and it was probably due to you guys.
Probably so. Yeah, I bet so.
Ross, I was gonna say, Ross, do you have any stories of Kochek?
Oh man, no, none that come to mind. Not right away.
Nothing that crazy.
No, I mean that was icing on the cake there.
I mean, we were at Love Handle. I think.
We went to. I came in to kind of help clean up, but there at that point, I came in.
We had to call in one of those special cleanup crews, and Ross came in to help, and we were like, "Dude, let's just go get breakfast." Yeah.
Let's go to Love Handle. Let's get a bite to eat. And I remember we saw a guest or two like walking towards Kochek, and we like pulled over. We're like, "Hey, you guys going to Kochek?" And they're like, "Yeah." We're like, "Sorry, we're closed. little accident, happened and saved him a couple of blocks walk, but felt pretty bad about it. But yeah, what do you do at that point?
And then you guys were doing something else too to help with some of the overflow of people not too long ago, right? With Dilly, where was that just their kind of thing where they were setting up? I forget what they were calling, like box office something or other
over at Coach Check.
Yeah,
trying to think of what that was.
Oh, you're talking about the pour over up front.
Yeah,
I wasn't there for that.
Was that just a couple time thing?
Yeah, we've I've had a touch and go relationship with pour overs for my whole coffee career, and that's how I got into coffee, just standing over the dripper and pouring coffee over or pouring water over it. But in the context of service, I wanted something that felt breezier, felt easier for the guest who like walked up to the counter and I didn't want guests who'd never experienced specialty coffee to say why is this taking this long? Why is that guy standing over there for 6 minutes just monkishly pouring this thing over? And I don't like things that make people feel like you have to be in the know or part of a club or part of a certain level of understanding to belong. And I've also experienced, I was at a farmer's market one time. My good friend and I were working for 1,000 Faces, and my boss insisted that we only do V60 pour-overs for the entire farmer's market crowd. And we ended up having this huge line, and everybody was pissed because they were just there to shop for vegetables. And at one point I looked over, and my buddy Tom had the top off of the swan neck kettle, and he was just sloshing coffee into all these drippers together. He's it just hit the fan. Anyway, that doesn't mean though that there aren't benefits. I mean, having a cup of coffee when it's at its peak freshness is cool. That's why I like espresso. And being able to serve maybe 3 or 4 different coffees from a curated menu and having them all dialed in is cool. There we are, curated. I have always been looking for ways to pull in that experience. Slow bar is one term you hear sometimes that cafes will do, where they'll have their regular service, and then over here they'll have a setup that looks a little bit like a cocktail bar, but it'll be pour overs. Here's a single origin espresso, and it might take you a little more time. You're planning to stay for a while, and that was what we did with that. The thing with Tinker, we partnered with them. There's that cool little ticket booth in the vestibule. It's this crazy old room that's all hand carved. It's where they used to have sell the tickets for the theater. And so we set up with these pour overs, and we're doing a couple different Tinker coffees a couple times. And we'll bring that back for sure once it warms up. It's just the vestibule gets really cold in the winter. And we may at some point add some sort of automated pour over situation to both of our cafes. I'm not sure.
So, Ross, do you do pour over here?
No,
no, neither.
No, we don't. I used to at home, and then I got a dripper, and I'm not pissed about it.
And so when, how long had the idea for Provider been in your brain? When did you decide to say, hey, I think we're at a point where we can try something different?
Can I ask? Can I chime in really quick? Yeah. I just want to stay in CoCheck for one more second. How long are you guys at CoCheck? Do you guys have a lease right now through a certain period? Because to me, the identity of CoCheck is CoCheck, right? But
I think we just signed a new lease. I think we're it's at least 2 or 3 years with another 2 or 3 year option. I think.
Awesome.
So, yeah, we should be around, and I'm constantly looking for ways to sort of. We definitely have not tapped out on all the different things that we want to do in that space.
Very cool.
More food again, maybe some automated pour overs. You didn't hear it here, but it's possible we might work in that we might be able to serve beer and wine at some point.
Ooh.
So
that would be sick.
Yeah, it'd be great.
You guys could do some
drink culture exclusive. You did hear it here. Sorry, Fabian. Go back to your question.
Yeah.
I'm interrupting everyone.
Oh yeah, I guess you already asked. So I can go ahead and answer. Provider, as you mentioned, the kind of march to saturation on specialty coffee shops is on at this point in Indianapolis, and I'm glad about that. It's funny. I was somebody directed my attention to an online review for another cafe recently that said, yeah, this could be the next CoCheck. And I was like, hold on a second. We've only been open for 18 months at that point. So, like you said, there's lots of cool stuff opening up, and as you know, as you've heard, I mean, business is all about timing. It's as much about timing as it is about having a good idea or a viable idea. It's about like when you enter a market and when you get established and so on. And we felt like we had some momentum at Coat Check. We exceeded our projections by a good, by 3 times.
Dang.
And so yeah, that first fall was like a real wake up call in terms of actual like business management, because when you're at a certain level, me, Paul, Ross, Courtney, we can just pound it out. We bang it out and it's fine. Inventory isn't all. It's not like super important, because I can just like walk back there and be like, yeah, okay, we need buy some cups, cool. But like when you're doing the level of volume that we ended up doing at Coat Shack in the fall of 2017, and have since sustained, thankfully, and knock on wood. You have to get all the structure in place to actually make it function. And by the time you do that at the level that we were at Coat Check, we were like, wow, we could potentially make this an even more sustainable business by scaling a little bit. Some of the complaints that we occasionally hear about Coat Check are like, parking's a little bit weird because it's Mass Ave. Sometimes you got to pay. So we're like, what if we just kind of did a hop, skip, and a jump to like a neighborhood and a kind of an interesting developing corridor for business. And one of our regulars at Coat Check happened to be the developer for this building, and they had gone through a couple different potential projects downstairs before they were like, hey, would you do something? And so we arrived at the idea of Provider, which I'd been kind of from a theoretical standpoint and like where specialty coffee fits into hospitality and where it's going. I've been pretty intrigued by it for a while. The idea that I don't know, to treat coffee the same way that you might treat cocktails or beer or wine or something is interesting to me. And some of the most interesting concepts that have been opening up around the country lately have been like all-day cafes where people just can kind of rely on them to be open, morning, afternoon, or evening, and can get whatever they kind of need there. It's not complicated, but it has what they want. I had been interested in doing a spot like that for a while because I'm also into cocktails and homebrew beer and all that kind of stuff. So I looked at it as a way to sort of expand the palettes and the sort of potential of what all of our people can do. I mean, I'm thinking about our pastry one of our pastry chefs, Jess Marvel, who does all of our macarons. I don't know if you've had our macarons before, but they're terrific. She has a big interest in cocktails too, and she advises us on how to put those flavors together. And if you have a dialed-in palate and can think about these things, why not kind of give people the option within the company to kind of branch out a little bit? You know what I mean? So that's how Provider came about.
And did it turn out how you wanted? Right? Is this long-term vision? Okay, you had complete creative control to create the space that you wanted to see.
Yeah. So I had a little more creative control here than I did at Coat Check. We were kind of there was a different agency that was doing, or a different firm that was doing the interior design of that space, and I just did the bar. Here, some of the interior was done. There was some of the walnut down there, and I was able to just create the space that I wanted, which was fun. And in terms of it turning out the way I wanted, it's a work in progress for sure. The design turned out, I think, really great. We get a lot of compliments about it, the plants, the neon, the sort of materials. One of my favorite things about the design is the way we sort of masked that cinder block wall.
I think you did a great job.
Big white cinder block wall, and that was Eric and Rebecca from Flatland Kitchen were mostly the ones that managed that. But anyway, and then in terms of the way that the business is flowed and done and everything, again, we exceeded our projections, we're in a healthy spot business-wise, which is great. We're looking to continue to explore the possibilities, especially on the evening side, when we get that patio back, more entertainment, more... we have such a defined sort of style of coffee service that I would like to I'm very interested in pursuing what it is that we bring to cocktails. I think so far we've kind of dabbled here and there, and I'm even in the next month or two, I'm putting a lot of my own energy into developing the cocktail menu further. So.
In these days, I think when you're fighting for everyone's attention, right, to come fill up your space, I think it's so important to think about experience. And there's only so much you can do before it becomes like kitschy and just like trying too hard. But like when I walk in here, and there's really nothing that I can put my finger on that just says like, oh, this is like a different experience, other than just like anecdotally, it just feels different than when I go somewhere else, right? And maybe it's just the fact that we vibe on music and that just makes me feel at home, or just how community oriented it is, right? To see how many local people you work with, like the plants that you guys use. Are you guys still going through Grounded?
Yeah, so we work with Grounded, and then Rachel, a good friend of ours who also works with Amanda at Grounded, she like maintains them all.
Yeah,
so
and then the art on the wall scene, you guys work with Flatland, which I mean they're iconic at this point in Indy.
Don't forget Lauren Bohall and that woodwork.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Those tables.
Yeah, Lauren Bohall is he did a ton of work for us. Yeah.
So it's just one of those spaces that just like makes you happy when you get there.
I'm glad.
And you've got the drink that will always be your go-to that's on the menu, so you get that, and it's just like there's a whole thing around it, right? Like it's almost like ritualistic, which I'm sure a lot of coffee people kind of have that ritual around their coffee that they can rely on.
Yeah,
so.
I've been really happy to see our kind of development of like a regular crowd. I mean, you mentioned it that Ross will often remember somebody's name the next time they come in. I make a stab at doing that as well. And then you mentioned like knowing that your go-to's on the menu. We actually don't do a lot of the sort of like new thing on the menu all the time, especially on the coffee side, mostly because like I'm a firm believer in the sort of like, is it better or is it just different question?
Yeah.
Where, I mean, I've spent months developing, for instance, the Pistaccio Latte. That's a big favorite of a lot of people.
I love that drink.
I'm glad you do.
Huge fan.
It took a while to figure out how to make that orgeat, how to source that pistachio. We use a raw pistachio butter out of California. How to develop the process so that my saucier Ryan can make gallons of it a week. You know what I mean? In an efficient time. And then how to keep it consistent, batch to batch. We use a refractometer that's separately calibrated for our sauces and syrups that we make in-house, so that every time you get that drink, and we use a different gram weight for it because the cup sizes are slightly different between the 12-ounce for here and the 12-ounce to go. It's really annoying. But we use a different gram weight for each drink so that to make sure that you get a consistent experience. And, you know, that process is a lot. And to try to, like, throw 3 or 4 new specialty lattes on the menu that like just because it's seasonal or just because it's, you know, different has never been our approach. I'd rather somebody be able to rely on like, yeah, the ginger latte and like.
Which one's the one that goes and you put the little rose water on there?
Pistachio.
That's the pistachio.
Dude, that's the tightest move
So
of
you
all
guys
coffee drinks. Seriously, you go there.
Well, you don't like the flamed orange peel?
That's tight, but when I look at someone that's never been there, I'm like, oh, you got to see this. They spray rose water on them. What?
So you guys don't just run down to CVS and buy pistachio syrup and just pour it in there? Like,
No. In fact, I don't know. It's a little insane the amount of time and effort that goes into the sauces and syrups that we do. I mean, we're making, you know, vat loads of butterscotch sauce with real cream and real pastry butter every week. The process that we go, like I give out the process freely for that ginger reduction that we do, but it's become, I think, probably at least the biggest cult hit in terms of the.
It's my favorite.
It's my favorite too. We take, you know, probably 30 to 50 pounds of fresh ginger a week, and we grate it and puree it and macerate it with some sugar and then press it out in a wine press. That slurry, we press it out in this tabletop wine press, and then that flows into a large vat, and then we have to heat it to 160 degrees because ginger has fresh ginger has an enzyme in it that will curdle milk. So you can deactivate that enzyme if you heat it to that particular amount. And then we measure it at 53% bricks every single batch. And bottle it and label it. So we have a saucier that works for us full time. His name's Ryan, and he's my best friend. And probably at this point, I love that guy. And that's all he does, is makes these sauces and syrup. So we have someone on full time who just does these things for those 3 drinks.
Damn it, Neal, that is insane.
I'm glad
I'm serious. That's
well, I mean, it's
people are listening to this.
so
Get
good.
your ass down here and like figure out what it's about, because it's different, right? And like I had no idea. I just knew that it was good, right? Like I was like, okay, yeah, that's a yummy drink. You're not gonna like. There's nobody else taking the time to go do that. Like that's nuts.
I just wonder when we're going to start bottling and selling.
Well, and that's one of our ideas behind, again, scaling to provider. Like, it was literally insane when we were doing that for one shop. If we have that saucier who's now making these specific sauces and reductions for 2 spots or 3 spots, then that makes more sense.
Is there a third spot?
I'm not going to say anything about that.
So what makes Provider different? I know we kind of hit on all these things so far, but like, so we're on 16th Street. We're just east of the Monon. Like, you're a destination location. Like, people have to drive to you to come here. Why do they do that?
Because they don't
Ross,
have to
you
walk
any ideas?
outside. We have a parking lot.
Parking lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really not that far off the beaten path.
There's a good book called What I Know About Running Coffee Shops by Colin Harmon, and he has this kind of continuum of like quality versus access that he talks about, which is like if you're in an airport or somewhere like that where you just have thousands and thousands of feet walking by you every day, you can make like a minimal effort on quality and just sort of stick the bag out there, and the money's going to come in, and people are going to, okay, well, I got this coffee at the airport, I'm going to slug it, it's fine. On the other end, of course, you have, here's this monkish approach to quality. I'm going to kind of really dive into the meticulousness of our craft, and I'm going to put my cafe like out here in a warehouse somewhere far away, and getting people to come out there, if you have the quality that they're after, is possible. It's not out of the question. I think here at Provider, I think our quality is decent, and I think we have positioned ourselves in a place that that is reasonably accessible, has that parking lot, and if you can't find a space in the parking lot, you can park in the mud across the street.
I was going to say that cars always in the grass over there.
Yeah, and apparently I've been told that we actually do have like that we're allowed to do that. Somebody told me that. I don't know.
All right, well,
the landlord of the city or whatever, but at some point,
up.
yeah. Anyway, it is a little bit of a destination spot, but I think it does. If parking is an issue for you, or maybe you just want to kind of escape downtown a little bit, it's not that far away, I guess. Is hopefully why we stay. And the
Great
neighborhood
proximity.
also.
Yeah. Well, and that was a question that I had. Like, how much of your decision is based on being a pillar of a community and helping revitalize? Like Jared's been in Kennedy King, so you can obviously talk to this point a little bit more than I can. But just like seeing this place change, like, was that part of the decision to be here? Is like, I want to be on the front lines of that.
It definitely was. I mean, in particular, I'm buddies with Erin Kem over at Cannonball. She's the chef there, and I remember before even thinking about Provider, going in there and like she was cooking us. Me and Paul were sitting at the bar, and she was cooking us a meal and talking about the neighborhood and stuff. And I was like, "That's cool. Like, this is a cool place to be." Feels very much like it felt very homey, I guess. It felt like a place that like I could potentially live, and I was just really impressed by the little crowd of people that came into Cannonball and were like, yeah, we're stoked on this, we live in the neighborhood, we just walked over here, and we felt like, yeah, we wanted to be kind of part of that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Ross, I got a couple questions for you.
Shoot.
You're behind the bar all day, almost every day. What are a few etiquette tips for people who come into a coffee shop?
Be careful, buddy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that sound was Neal kicking people. Be like, don't say anything.
Well,
I mean, this is just friendly advice, right? I think, was it Do 317? Someone put out an article a couple weeks ago, and it was a phenomenal article, and I think they actually referenced you guys a little bit.
Yeah.
And they had about 5 or 6 tips that to many are common sense, but to others, it's just like they just don't know better.
Yeah, someone shared that with me, and I was like, dang, were they working with us on that? That was
Spot on, right?
No one told me anything about this. That was great.
Three or four things for listeners to be like, oh, shit, I'm that person. Like,
yeah, I mean, if you're a solo diner, don't take up, 3-4 seats. But I suppose we could be better about, hooks or, places to store your bags or something. That's something we're definitely working on. But
don't put your coat or your bag
don't
on a
don't
seat.
claim 3 seats for you, yourself, and your laptop and phone. It's not necessary. Oh man! Other than that, please don't put your gum on the handle of the mug and put it in the dish tub.
Should people come to you and get their drinks, or should you be bringing the drinks to the people?
Oh well, I mean, I'll pretty much tell them loud and clear if it's their first time. It's like, hey, I'll holler at you when your drink is ready. That usually doesn't mean I'm going to come to your table and holler at you. With your drink, and I do expect, touch base on what I was saying earlier, please read me as much as I'm trying to read you. Like, if you see I'm busy, I can't step away, listen for your name to be called and you hear it and you respond. That's pretty straightforward. I've had several experiences where I'm just like screaming their name and they're like 2 seats away from me.
That was me, like the last time I was here.
Really?
Yeah, somebody yelled
it's okay.
Fabian like 3 times.
I
was
get
like,
it.
oh, I'll be there in a minute. They're like, no, Fabian, your tea's ready. I was like, cool. I'm sorry.
I mean, it's all good, like if you can't get to
you.
it right away, it's no biggie. But it is funny how, some people will just, I don't know if it's by choice or what, but they just don't hear shit.
A lot of times it's headphones,
Well,
headphones
they're having a meeting and they're in a really in-depth conversation, and yet at the same time I have 7 people at my register. I can't really...
We do get a lot of first dates here because it's a coffee and
it's so cute, though.
Place, yeah.
Oh,
Some
man.
Tinder stuff.
I love it.
Sometimes
So
it's sometimes you're like standing at the bar like trying not to listen because you're like, oh, this is
Dude, Valentine's Day, you should have been here. That was fun. That was fun.
What about phone calls? Like people taking actual phone call, like meetings on at the space.
I mean, a lot of times people stand in the vestibule and do that, which is nice.
Yeah, well, I've noticed that, and you know what? We were talking about music earlier. I was wanting to turn the table and ask you, what do you think about the volume of music in Provider specifically? I mean, you spend enough time there. I like to keep it pretty high. I have reasons, but...
Well, I think I've never found it to be a problem, especially because the music isn't like intrusive, right? And it's not like offensive in any way. Like if we were listening to something that you'd hear like 3 Floyds or something, like maybe we'd have a problem. But the one thing that I look at it is if it is a little bit too loud, it forces you to get closer to somebody else. You know what I mean? Like you're going to talk a little bit closer to them. That conversation is going to be a little bit more intimate. So I kind of like that unintended effect, if it might be unintended about that. But I don't think it's an issue.
I think that's totally intentional on our part.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like to keep the volume up. I just don't feel like people want to meet, and feel like everyone around them can hear what they're meeting about.
Totally.
Yeah. That bothers me, if I'm at the register having a conversation with a guest, I don't want everyone to be able to hear me. So, speak up a little louder, Don't ask me to turn the music down. Because, I'll do it.
I had one etiquette thing that came to mind if you want me to jump in. This one is, I guess, so... If you're going to have a meeting at a coffee shop, and I don't want to make it specific to just us because I don't want to sound whatever, but if you're going to meet and take up 3 or 4 seats with people, like it is courteous for each of you to buy something, like a drink or something, typically, and that's not because like I'm greedy for money or something. It's just like if you're going to take up 4 seats, you can't just kind of like hang on the one other person's cup of coffee for 2 hours. That's not.
It's like going to a buffet, one person paying and 3 people getting plates.
Kind of like that, yeah. It's a little bit like that, and it's not a hard and fast thing. Obviously, if you want to accompany somebody, maybe you are on some specific diet or something, and it's hard to find something, and just need to drink water. I get that, but one table, a 4-top table, 1 drink, and 4 laptops is like something we see pretty regularly. And I would just suggest that, it's if you're going to take a seat and hang, try to support the business that you like to be in. I was just responding to a guest the other day. I routinely respond to, especially students, about this laptop deal, and I was saying she had gone on this kind of longer sort of thing about how unfair this was and so on, and how she's not going to come here anymore because of this laptops policy. And I was saying, most people that we talk to have found it like a positive thing, and she had kind of suggested that you just don't want students here because you want to make more money. And in a sense, I just want to be like, yeah, you're right, because we don't make a load of money at the end of the year in this business. If you want these places to survive, you kind of have to take part. You have to be willing to hang.
But that sounds so entitled. What are they saying with that? It's I don't even understand that. Is it do they think that you charge students more money, or do you make more money off a drink from somebody else, or
there's a
are they
sense,
expecting that they can just sit there because they are a student?
I think that's part of it. There's a sense that as a student, there's student discounts exist, and that because you're in a particular place in life, more people should sort of cater to you in a sort of a charitable way, which I get that. I was a student at one point, and we want to provide a space where it's cool if all you want is a cup of coffee, I'm going to sit here for a couple hours and chill with your laptop. I get that. That's fine. I really appreciate you coming here and doing that. But if we need to sort of around the edges, whether it's weekends or whatever, and suggest we have to turn tables a little bit more so we can stay alive, stay in business. That's when just some understanding needs to occur, I guess.
Well, and I think it might just be more than students. People in general who have never ran a business or been behind the scenes with a business may not realize, they come in on a Saturday and see it hustling and bustling and, people everywhere buying, but they don't realize, take 30% of that for taxes, take, 20-some% of that, 40% of that for payroll.
Totally.
At the end of the day, you're not making $500,000
absolutely
take
not.
home as your personal pay.
In fact, I'll be very transparent. Our labor percentage, so an industry standard labor percentage for coffee, for a healthy coffee shop, is 30 to 35%. Ours hangs over 40 most of the time because we pay as much as we possibly can. That's why you don't see a lot of employees wandering off.
I was going to say, you guys don't see turnover because you care about the people who are there.
And that's why we can employ people as talented as Ross and Courtney and the people that we have on. That is a strategy that we have. Whether it's going to work long term, I don't know. So far, we were profitable last year, but we were profitable by 4 to 5%, which, again, in a healthy cafe, you really want to look toward that 6 or 10% number. Yep. I think we'll get there even with paying what we're paying. But, to suggest that I should buy a drink and I should come in here, not come in here and loiter and actually buy a drink. They have plenty of money. They're busy or something. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
If that isn't the biggest fallacy out there, right, for business owners of just oh, you're doing great. You own a business. Okay, cool. Yeah, sure. Before we get into some rapid fire questions, I really want to make a point. I think that there's some mysticism around coffee. So if there's 4 or 5 maybe kind of most commonly questions that are being asked, or just barriers to entry for specialty coffee, or just being nervous your first time going to order something, right? Maybe somebody doesn't know what a cappuccino is, or cortado, macchiato, whatever. Are there a couple things that you can throw out there? And I think this drink is kicking in. I'm talking really fast.
You are. You're yelling at them, man. Slow down. Relax.
That you can kind of throw out there for people. Let me slow down.
Well, let me slow it down for you.
Give us that sweet,
DJ
sweet
roll.
and sultry.
Oh yeah. No. I don't know. I mean, I hear dark roast pretty frequently, which is not really a thing that we do.
Like people will order a dark roast.
Yeah, they
like, I'll
order
take
a dark roast, and I just say okay.
Like the Christmas blend, can I get that?
Yeah, right.
I just say okay, and I, serve them a coffee, and they think it's a dark roast, and I hope they enjoy it. And if they come back and ask what it is, that's great. I feel like a lot of, the discovery of coffee drinks happens on the fly, in their own hands. I don't feel like it should be offered up. I feel like that comes off as pretentious and not something that I want my industry to represent.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think maybe it's more 5 or 6 years ago, you would hear like baristas occasionally talking about like educating the guest about coffee or something, and sort of seeming like they had this higher purpose and like kind of, pushing wonderful coffees out into people's like lives and stuff. And, for me, it's more important to make someone feel absolutely comfortable in a space. And if they happen to go from, drinking a butterscotch latte every day to, I'm going to try a flat white, something with like a little less milk, no added sweetness, and just the coffee and stuff. And like, I like that. I wonder what it is that I like about this. And
It's my drink.
If they end up liking, drinking straight espresso every day like me and Ross do, so be it. That's cool. We can chat about why the espresso tastes the way we like it. And, we can kind of, be nerdy about the extraction and stuff like that. But like, we've tried to design our menu so that it's just as quote unquote cool to get the ginger latte because of the time and effort that goes into it, just like a craft cocktail, as it is to get the espresso, just like a glass of whiskey or a spirit or something at a bar. Like, it's cool to get either of those.
So, and I just want to understand what you're saying. So it's like you do the things you do because you think that they're cool and you know that it's the highest quality. And if somebody happens to ask what or why that is, then you give them the education.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Rather
no
than
one's going
hey,
to listen
Exactly.
unless they want to know.
And yeah, in fact, one of my least favorite things to hear at a bar is like someone, I don't know, like we get so many guests in here that are doctors and they're lawyers and they're people in the community that have their own shit they got to think about all the time. If they want to like, if they want you to tell them exactly where the coffee came from, how it was processed, and what the farmer's name is, like they'll ask. We can put it on the menu if they want to read it. But if they're not asking for that information, for me to be like, that came from Honduras and his name is Juan, like I'm not going to do that.
Juan.
I think you just scared Fabian.
No. I shouldn't have asked. I'm sorry.
No, I completely agree with that, though.
But that's a cool approach. Like, I thought the very opposite, right? Like, especially with this show, it's like always is education is always like this thing that you want to push on people because that could be the thing that keeps you from that person really buying into something or falling more in love with it, right? But I like that approach of just like, if you want to know, you'll ask, and then we're happy to tell you.
Yeah, I
right?
mean,
It's hard to
just
sit on
like
knowledge.
your cup that you had back in Wisconsin.
Johnson.
Yeah, right.
Johnson
Yeah,
Public
I
House.
mean, the guy simply suggested like you should try it without cream. You
And I
drove
think
off without.
I was even like, should I put some cream in this or something? He wasn't just like,
Oh,
don't
gotcha,
put cream in
gotcha.
there. He's like, you should try it without.
Okay. But then you like took off. It was in your own hands. You tried it, and you were like, "What is this?" And then
Yeah.
it opened up this whole new world.
Exactly.
And that's how it is. For I feel 90% of the people where it actually sticks and it becomes a real
Totally.
passion or hobby of theirs is the people that it happens not necessarily in a shared experience. That is when it's best for sure, but like in a solo experience where they just like mind blown.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
of food and beverage. I mean, that old adage from politics, I think, makes a lot of sense. Where if you're explaining, you're losing. Like if somebody can't pick up what they've just got as a drink, like Dave Arnold kind of has a similar. He's that kind of cocktail wizard that does a lot of kind of sciencey stuff to produce really good cocktails. You don't want to have to explain to your guest why something is good, because if you have to do that, then you're probably covering up for something. If they can pick up that whatever it is and taste it or bite into it or whatever, and they're like, holy shit, that's good. Like, that's what you want. And that's the same with coffee. That's the exact same.
Yep. Did that answer your original question?
I think so. Sometimes we get lost and we don't know what we asked, but I'm glad we ended up where we do. So
cool.
We'll hop into some rapid fire questions here, and we recently added some new ones. I'm excited about this. And Jared, I don't know if you knew that or not, but
I didn't, but that's okay.
So we'll kick it off, and you guys can each give a quick rapid fire answer here. So Neal, we'll start with you. What is your proudest creative work to date?
Oh, boy. Proudest creative work to date is, I'm going to keep it within the context of coffee and shops. Oh, wow. I'm going to say my proudest creative work is actually that ginger reduction that I've been working on for 3 or 4 years.
I'm proud of you for that too. Like, for real.
Ross is like, I'm glad you said that because he was going to take credit for it.
Yeah. We use it in a lot of different things, and yeah.
That penicillin.
Yeah.
Sorry, get that sexy on.
Is that your answer? The penicillin? Did you create that drink?
Oh, was that the same
No, he was
question
just saying,
for me?
He was just saying that
I completely
the ginger
agree.
reduction is used in the penicillin.
Gotcha. Yeah.
The same question for me. I once wood burned into a djembe drum, a really cool cymbal. No, I'm just playing. I did. It was really cool. I don't feel like that's a legitimate answer, though. Let's see. Creative, huh?
Pass is a very acceptable answer here, guys. These are new questions that we're throwing out there. So,
I'm going to pass and then revisit, and then maybe we can edit later, huh?
totally acceptable.
Let's swoop it.
Let's go here. What would you like what would you title this current chapter of your life, and why?
I mean, simply growth. I mean, there's a lot going on professionally, personally.
So simply growth or growth?
Growth.
Okay.
And there's nothing simple about it. Yeah. There's certainly a lot going on professionally and, personally.
I would say the title would be The Fog. Subtitle, New Parenthood and Small Business Ownership.
There you go.
The Fog. I like that. I'm stealing that.
Favorite book or movie that has inspired you?
Go for it.
I mean, Hook. I mean, although I'm not very creative. What, really?
I love that movie.
I mean, that's like my all-time favorite. So, yeah, I would go to sleep to that every night.
Yeah, let's see.
Rufio, right?
Oh, gosh. Favorite book or movie? I would say... I do read a lot of audiobooks. I'm trying to think if there's like the main one that's inspired.
The 4-Hour Work Week.
No, I hate anything related to like kind of inspirational, like I don't know, how to meet friends and people or influence people. Like no, it's nothing like that. I'm gonna probably go ahead and say that lately, my biggest inspiration in that regard is listening to. I'm gonna sidestep that and say it's diving into Bruce Springsteen's catalog of records.
Really?
Yeah, so not a movie or a book.
Is there a particular song that we can listen to that's good?
I would say just start with Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska, the whole record. I don't know. I think of somebody who's my dad was more into like Doobie Brothers and 70s sort of pop, like rock, like this, like the Eagles, and I only got into Springsteen later, and understanding what it means to create something at a particular time in a particular space that just like resonated so much with so many people. That's really inspirational. I mean, it's not as resonant now, of course, but if you think back to that time frame, it helps that my father-in-law is like a kind of a card-carrying Union kind of like Rust Belt dude. So I talked to him about
with
it.
With
sometimes,
an American flag bandana hanging out
that
in his
kind
back
of guy.
pocket.
Exactly. Yeah.
White T-shirt, rolled up sleeves. I like it.
All right. Where is a secret spot for you to get away from things?
It's just my house.
Do you have a secret spot in your house?
I feel like our answers are very different.
Yeah. Well, you've got kids.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. No, cat in my arms, seat on my couch.
I like cats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't know it until recently. I'm a cat dad now.
Oh,
I've
cat
got
daddy.
two.
Yep. I've got a shirt that says it. Proves
Ooh,
it. I'm a cat dad.
I'll have to get me one of those.
I roll.
I'm going to say Holiday Park is my favorite place in Indianapolis.
Did you know that tree? That tree
that kind of hangs low over the ground.
Yeah,
totally.
That's a real special spot for me.
I go there by myself sometimes. I go down by the river myself. I frequently take like one or the other of my kids out there and just let them wander by the river.
Nice. I'll never go there with you, but
well, we should.
I love that. Well, I don't
feel like
know.
we've been
Maybe
there
we should have a
together.
meeting
I
there.
feel like where have we been outside together? Anyway,
Together. We'll close it out with two more here, and this is my personal favorite question. What are you currently obsessed with?
Twin Peaks.
Oh, boom.
Anybody
Was there a
seen
reboot,
that?
or is that the original?
Well, I'm halfway through The Return, season 3, which aired in 2016, 25 years after the original.
Dang. That's
which
just
is
a weird show, man.
Really freaking cool. Anyways, I have no idea what's actually happening right now,
You're
but I just
watching
can't
it.
stop watching. It's so freaking good. Yeah.
I'm gonna say I was gonna say vermouth because that's a close second, I think, because I've been kind of getting into the world of vermouth quite a bit lately, and my friend. But I really have to credit both Al and Nick, our bartenders downstairs, because Nick actually gave me a whole book about it, and I've been reading it. But more than that, I'm interested and obsessed lately with carbonation. And what?
I just hope that you're going to be my hero and open up the first local sparkling water company here in Indy.
Yeah. So anyway, like
Anyway.
maybe I won't do that. No.
Fat chance.
I can explain for like 1 second. I think that bubbles are really interesting in drinks, and ever since I was home brewing in like 2012, I was doing that pretty heavily. I always liked the process of carbonating, whether it was through an yeast fermentation in a bottle and like getting bubbles naturally that way, or forced carbonation. It's one of those detail elements that a lot of people seem to just overlook. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, here's this thing we all take for granted. But when you start diving into the science behind it and the mouthfeel of different types of sparkling water, whether it's San Pellegrino with the smaller bubbles, a little bit higher mineral content, or Topo Chico that's giant bubbles, and Perrier somewhere in the middle. And the way that you can create larger or smaller bubbles. I've even been trying to source some nitrous oxide because you can use that in solution with CO2 to create a certain mouthfeel. Nobody seems to want to sell me any, though. I can't imagine
I know
why.
some people from back in my touring days. Just kidding.
Yeah,
Just
anyway,
kidding.
that's what I'm obsessed with lately because, again, it's easy in so many ways to ruin a fizzy drink by making it flat if it's too warm or too watery, or there's too much still ingredients. And the idea of like getting a cocktail where you mix it all up and then just like squirt like a little bit of soda on top is just like really banal to me at this point. So I'm going to start carbonating cocktails in a bottle soon, and it's going to be part of the menu here. And they're going to be super fizzy and like 25 degrees or less, and that's what I'm obsessed with.
You're a details dude, man. I like it.
That's what I'm into, I guess.
Yeah.
Recommendation for a future guest.
Ooh,
One each.
one each.
Are you talking drinks?
I have honestly have to
future
think about,
guest on the show of drink culture.
Oh.
I honestly have to think about who you haven't had on yet. I am gonna let's see. Go for it, Ross.
This is going to become a problem once we've interviewed so many people.
Exactly.
I think.
What's your answer, Ross?
Thanks, Neal. Appreciate that. Oh,
I'm going to say this might be a little bit weird because I'm actually going to recommend another cafe person, Josie Hunkler.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
She is a buddy of mine. I don't actually talk to her as much as I would like to, or as much as I used to be able to. But she opened up a cafe called Rabble over on, you guys all know that, 10th Street, and she's just an interesting person. Got an interesting perspective about community and the way her work fits into it. She's generous with her time, generous with her business. I have had very nice long conversations with her about like kind of business management and ownership, but as well as just like community stuff. And she's great.
Oh, I completely agree with you.
No, you can't have my answer.
I love Josie. She's great. So you were recommending her? Suggestion?
That was my answer.
That was okay. That's some bullshit.
What,
It was good bullshit, but it was bullshit.
Was that your answer?
It was bullshit?
No.
What?
Was that your answer? You were going to take that?
Well, no, I wasn't going to take that. No, it's not even answering the question.
Yeah, that was. It was. They were asked who's going to be on next guest.
Oh, that's what you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who would you recommend? Who do you want us to talk to?
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I follow you now. Okay, Josie's great. Oh shit. That totally changes things. I was like, really? That's an interesting question. I don't know how I'm going to answer that. Yeah, shit. I would agree with you. Josie would be fantastic. Yeah.
Game, set, match.
There we are.
Yeah. Josie, if you're listening,
We're coming for you.
Yeah, there you go. We're coming for you. Thank you so much for inviting us here, providing some delicious cocktails and espresso drinks. As a reminder, people, we are in the Tinker House Event Center. What's the address here?
Yeah, it's 1101 East 16th Street.
And where can people follow everything that you guys are doing? Where can they go get some delicious beverages?
Yeah, we got Cocheck Coffee. You can follow us at Cocheck Coffee on Instagram, and we're right down there on Mass Ave above the Rathskeller in the Athenaeum building. And we have Provider Indie. That's the handle on Instagram. And that's it so far.
Yeah.
So far. Did you hear that?
Yep. Cliffhanger. You got to leave them wanting more. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. As we like to say, drink culture.
Know your city.
Know your city. We're
Thank
out.
you.